Thank you so much for taking the time. And before we dive in, very curious if you could share a little bit about your journey from VC to also a founder.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. A bit of background. So I can maybe start from the beginning. My name is very confusing to most and also to my own self. So Francesca, my parents just like the name. There's not an Italian drop in me. Bailey, it's French by origin, but actually I have more relatives in Australia than I do in Belgium, where the name originally comes from. And just to confuse everyone else, I was born in Hong Kong, but then live in Germany. So these days I have a bit of an identity crisis. So it's a citizen of the world kind of description. And why I'm kind of explaining this is kind of, I think this is a bit of a reflection of my career to date. So I'm actually a biologist by degree. Dipped my toe in academia and then quickly retracted it, realizing that I did not want to be a lab rat for the rest of my life. And then moved into the fast-paced startup world, spent some time there before spending a short span of time in venture capital. Got a very heavy dose of imposter syndrome there and felt like I had no idea what I was doing as a 20-something-year-old evaluating startups and not really having spent much time in that world. So then decided to become a consultant at a private equity firm, which is an interesting role, but not for me. It's a lot of sort of advising people to do things rather than do things yourself. And it did give you a bit of a time, though, to kind of realize that I really enjoyed venture. And quite honestly, I don't think anyone really knows what they're doing in venture. If anyone says so, I think they must have a crystal ball. And so I was like, okay, I might as well join that merry gang again. And I did so, I would say, through the side door entrance by founding my own podcast series, which was all about making venture capital more accessible. And that led me to meet a whole bunch of VC funds. And I get a lot of people asking me how to get into venture. I think, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on the way you look at it, VC is an incredibly transactional ecosystem. It's a lot like, what can you do for me and what can I do for you? And if it's synergistic, then it's a good relationship. And so I offered with my podcast a platform for particularly junior folks to express what they were interested in investing in, tell them a little bit about their fund, how they got into it. I also thought it was a great way of highlighting more of the diversity of venture capital at the junior levels than you might think. We had a whole, we had a journalist, we had a doctor, so that was super cool. And that allowed me to meet lots of interesting funds, one of which being Project A. So I relocated to Germany, spent a couple of years with them, looking at all things health and climate related. Following on from that, I moved to a fund called Revent, also based in Germany. And last year, had a bit of a crisis, a quarter life crisis, maybe third life crisis, depending on which way you want to spin it. I kind of came to sort of some realizations that, firstly, your reputation on like what you invest in, and how well those deals do, it's very much reliant on the approval of the rest of the fund, right? And if that can be quite challenging, because you can have full conviction on a deal and it not go through, and there's not really any sort of merit or credit to your name that this is the one that you betted on. Second, fundamentally, I love building stuff, and I think again linked to sort of, you can work super hard on a deal and it doesn't go through. And okay, yes, there is a lot of learnings and enjoyment in the journey, but knowing who I am as a person, I kind of wanted that opportunity. And then thirdly, not such a enjoyable experience is your job. In my case, Brexit is visa dependent. And so I came quite uncomfortable thing if I wanted to do something else, and I would need to find an employer to be aligned with that. And I was like, actually, like it doesn't sit well with me. I'm going to go on this journey of starting my own company, but alongside that, having to change my visa from an employed skilled worker to a self-employed person in Germany as a non-fluent speaker was an interesting one. So kind of a nod to what we were talking about earlier. Founding a company is not easy, but it's not just founding a company, it's the other things that come with it. That you sort of have to set yourself up for success, whether that's visa related, whether it's finance related, whether it's just, surrounding yourself with the right people. I think often people see the startup, but they actually aren't so concentrated on what's actually had to happen with that person to get them there, and set themselves up so they can do that. So yeah, now building Scout, which is a CRM tool for VCs, and yeah, excited to tell you a little bit more about it.
Yeah, tell me more about Scout. I think that's a beautiful bridge to to that.
Sure. So having worked at a handful of funds now, particularly at the junior level, I got increasingly frustrated with the tools that I was given to use. And the irony being, right, is that as a VC, you're in charge of kind of predicting what's going to be a future success in the latest technologies, and then you find yourself manually inputting data into boxes, and you just think that there's like a stark irony in this. And secondly, I kind of realized that most funds are holding incredibly valuable data on private companies, but they're not really leveraging it. And people are just defaulting to what they know, and that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah.
And so I thought, you know what, like, I know this problem, and I'm going to go out and really figure out whether this is aligned with the rest of the people in the ecosystem. I've now interviewed over 200 funds, and just understanding their tools, what their kind of biggest time constraints are, frustrations, and 80% of them have said that they're not satisfied with their tech stack / CRM. So I thought that was enough data to indicate that something needs to be done. And so here we are.
Yeah, so excited and very brave to also take the leap from, let's say, safe employee environment to doing it all yourself, and also abroad. That brings in another element. What surprised you most about being a founder, like before and after taking the leap?
Before, I can't really tell you, because obviously you don't really know what surprised you, but maybe the like what I alluded to earlier of like how much needs to be done in order to get even to the point where you can speak to VCs, for example. So much has happened in order to kind of get to that point. And it could be as simple, or in Germany's case, unsimple, as setting up a company, which in Germany is you need a gold star and a stiff drink if you've gone through that journey yourself. In the UK, it's a lot simpler, but yeah, it's not an easy feat. But also the mental work that's gone into it, right? Setting yourself up to like being a founder, thinking about the problem, how you're going to solve it. A lot of thinking has gone into that at that point. So I think before even starting, I think it's like the amount that needs to be done even before when I was starting to speak to founders, right? I think what surprised me the most after being a founder is realizing what the role of a founder is, and perhaps it's different for a lot of folks, but I think from speaking to founders now, and having more of a unfiltered conversation than founders would have with me as an investor.
Mm-hmm.
It's very like you do a lot of boring stuff as a founder. Like my role, I see it as getting things in a place so that the people who are my team can do the job really, really well and do what they're having to do, and I have to do all the other stuff that's not so interesting. I mean, obviously there's times where you shape the vision and that's incredibly engaging, etc. But it's a lot around, okay, yesterday I had to spend an hour making sure that all my invoices were aligned and correct. And then I had to kind of add a whole bunch of prospective customers. This is not particularly interesting and not particularly mentally stimulating, but it's no one else is going to do it, and it's integral for the business to move forward. So yeah, I would say prepare to be bored. Sometimes it's not all fun and like craziness.
Yeah, I recognize it a lot, but I also have to add because I also moved from VC to founder back to VC ultimately, I was indeed also bored with these menial tasks, but also at the same time very much stretching myself to skills that I didn't even know I had, and also things that I didn't know I had, that I found out that I was really good at. So I don't know, what was for you the key motivation of moving from VC to ultimately a founder?
I kind of alluded it a little bit earlier in terms of like, I genuinely felt very uncomfortable that I had relied on other people for my visa. That really didn't sit very well with me. I wanted to live in Germany, and like that's when I left Revent, I got an email. I got a message in the post from the German government to say, if you've not sorted out in 6 months, you're deported.
That's scary.
That's not fun, and having to sort of figure that out. Now I feel quite empowered that I'm now on the path to getting a passport, and that is very empowering in of itself. So that was a big thing. And then secondly, I think I've learned about myself that I thrive when I have a lot of responsibility, and when I'm making decisions, they have sort of direct output into the outcomes. As you know, in venture capital, if you're not a partner, you can have challenges with getting your deal through, or even with like founders, for example, they can decide not to take your money and pick someone else. Whereas I think obviously there is many things outside of your control when starting a business, but there is a lot more things in your control when you are, compared to being an employee, or the ultimate decision comes down to someone else.
Yeah, super interesting. And I'm curious, when you made that leap, what doubts did you had to overcome? You mentioned in the beginning, when you were just starting out your career, all the way in the beginning, that you had some imposter syndrome. What were your key barriers of eventually just doing it?
I mean, I think imposter syndrome is always going to be there. And I think just battling, I think it's challenging when you're a very critical person, to kind of rationalize with your own self of whether you can do it or not. But I think I can't sort of necessarily pinpoint like the biggest challenges. I think it was just like, okay, this is what you've decided to do. This is what you need to do in order to do it. And try your best, to achieve those things. And like, again, historically, when I've looked back on when I've thrived, it's when I've given myself a goal and I've given myself the responsibility, mainly to myself, and getting there, that I've done well. So yes. How about you? What were the biggest challenges for you to overcome?
Ooh, for me, I switched from VC to a founder, and I wanted to be a founder before I actually knew what I was going to build. So for me, like picking the idea that I felt was worthwhile spending everything on was a little bit of a barrier to me, because you see so many ideas in VC and you see so many fail, and I think the longer you stay in VC, the more things you see fail. So indeed, what you said about being a critical thinker, every idea that I had, I could also sort of like put in a graveyard very quickly, because I thought, oh, it's never going to work. But ultimately, I did choose something that was very close to my heart. Maybe almost too close in hindsight. Whereas I think it could have been a little bit more professional and successful if it was also a little bit more balanced with, let's say, your rational brain. So I think that's a big learning for me. But I'm very curious what your tips or thoughts are. I coach a lot of VCs, and sometimes they are doubting whether they want to be on the startup side for a while or maybe permanently. What tips or thoughts do you have for those who are doubting about switching from VC to either building their own startup or joining someone else's startup?
I mean, I mentor a fair few people, and I think I always start with the question of like, what makes you happy? Like,
Love that.
I think I kind of came to the conclusion of like what was important to me and what makes me happy, and kind of independence was a big thing of just, I know that I'm happy to make errors as long as they're mine. Like I and like I kind of knew that I needed that sort of position in order for me to thrive. I think second was that I wanted to be able to help people. And that made me very, very happy. Obviously, venture capital is a great way of doing that. You give capital, but also support. And I've always really, really enjoyed that. But then I also seeing a lot of my contemporaries in the VC capacity struggle, right? It's not an easy career. And you often hit glass ceilings or burn out or feel like none of your choices were good ones. It's a lot. It's not the easiest career. It's like, oh, how could I help them? And how could I set myself up for doing that? And I fundamentally think that if I build the best CRM for venture capitalists, it has a knock-on effect on who it helps, right? It helps the VCs, it helps the startups, it helps the wider ecosystem. By being able to map out your network, you can really start leveraging it better, and over time hopefully has a very positive impact, right? The people that need to be meeting each other can be meeting each other. Like a prime example, let's say you're Bill and you're working at a venture capital fund and you meet a founder working on water pollution. Now it's not in your thesis and it hasn't been in your fund's thesis for a while, but 3 years ago you met Sarah, who works at another fund, who does work on that might not come to mind immediately when you're speaking to this founder, because you spoke to Sarah 3 years ago. But if you had a system that goes, hey, actually you're speaking to this water pollution startup, maybe not the right thesis for yours, but how about Sarah? Like this is kind of what I'm so excited about building. And so I just got so excited about this idea of like, okay, as an investor, you can only help so many startups, but as a founder building a system that like the ecosystem uses, like that has exponential potential to help the ecosystem that you love. So I think that really resonated with me. And I think thirdly is financial independence, to be honest. I mean, I think VC is ironically like presented to you as an opportunity to become very rich. Now, I think, yes, it's of course feasible, but my top tip for those who are listening, VCs might offer you carry in the fund, and it will equate to potentially millions and millions of dollars, but an awful lot needs to happen that is outside of your control in order for that to transpire. Yeah, don't get sucked into potentially thinking VC is going to make you a very rich person. But actually, I think there is a lot of opportunity as a founder to make a lot of money. So not that I want to be the next squillionaire, but again, back to kind of the independence component. You know, if I can produce the best tool in this niche market, I have a very strong conviction that there's going to be a buyer and that I'm going to be rewarded for that. And yeah, that's way more in my control than, a portfolio of companies that, they're doing their journey and you want to bet. But actually a super good analogy I was given is like there's two ways to get rich. You can either be the shark or you can swim under the shark and hope that you catch anything that the shark eats as sort of, the debris. And yeah, that's the two ways to get rich. And I'd rather be the shark than the thing that sits under the shark, because you cannot decide which direction to go. You always have to follow the shark.
Yeah, nice. I love that analogy. And I can just see a spark in your eyes when you're talking about why you started Scout. And that is, I think, very important also to pull you through the ups and the downs. Yeah, we're nearing kind of like the end of the recording, but I wanted to give you one nice last question because we actually met at a really nice dinner and you were amazing at giving all these really cool questions, like prompts. Like I remember you asked me if you were the last dragon rider or the last dragon, which would you be? And I just thought it was very funny. So I wanted to end also with one for you. So if there's anything you would change and you would have a magic wand about the VC ecosystem, what would you change?
That's a great question.
And it's magic, so it can be really.
Oh my gosh!
Doesn't have to be realistic.
There's so many things I'd want to change. That I'll be true to. I'll be true to Scout and what we're building and what I want to be the magic wand in essence. So back to sort of network. I think we are all at the mercy of bias. Fundamentally in defaulting to what we know because and there's a lot to be said for that and pattern recognition, but I think I wish VCs were more data led than they are, and that I think in turn would and like it's very hard to quantify some certain metrics, but I feel like there are so many founders that didn't succeed because they didn't meet the right person at the right time. And I'm so excited about like the new age that we're going into where accessibility is being unlocked through many different means, through data, through network, through AI creating on the 600th Google search page, the answer to your questions or the right place for you to be. And so, this is what I wish for is that we make the VC ecosystem more accessible and less, the 1%, and only if you're in that 1%, then that leads to success. Because I think there are so many ideas that, if given the right opportunity, could really make a positive difference in this little world we live in.
Amazing. Thank you so much. If anybody wants to approach you, what's the best way to reach out? LinkedIn or?
LinkedIn is fantastic, or pretty easy to find my email as well.
Great. Amazing, Francesca. Lovely speaking with you, and thank you so much for your time.